Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr, and today we're joined with Tom Evans. He is the new Western States 100 champion, his second outing at Western States. And he came in not only first place, but in the fourth fastest time ever at Western States.
Has that sunk in, Tom? How does that sound? Does it feel right as it kind of gets laid on top of you?
Well, firstly, Dom and Scott, thanks so much for having me on the show. But I guess it's starting to sink in. I guess less so about the time. Like for me, the time was always if I took care of business on the trail and I had the day that I was hoping to have and I was training to have, then I knew that it was going to be a quick time. But I never sort of during the race never sort of sweated about the time and the details. And if it was going to be quick, it was going to be quick, and if it wasn't, then it wasn't. And I got sent a picture of the geek stats today. I think the important parts of the race I ran quick, and in the bits that I could sort of just shut things down, I did. So it's really nice. Really nice to be sat here sort of with those accolades. But for me, I was just super happy with the performance, and the time is the time for me. It's a nice to have, but it's fine.
If you haven't figured out, Tom is not from the U.S. He's British. The first question I have is, how do you get the Cougar, which is the trophy for first place? Do you put that in a carry-on? Do you check that? How do you get the Cougar back to the UK?
It is shipped at great expense. And I've actually had a tracking notification from it this morning that it's planning on being delivered on Tuesday next week, so in another 5 days' time. I offered saying, I can put it in my carry-on, or I can just carry it in and put it on the seat next to me flying home. But no, they said, oh no, don't worry, we'll ship it for you. It's much easier. But as soon as they said that, now sort of with post-Brexit, it's now even more difficult to send things to the UK, even from the US. So that's I didn't have to deal with that, but I imagine it's saying it's going to be delivered on Tuesday, but I imagine it will be far more complicated than that, and I would almost guarantee that I won't have it in the house next Tuesday.
Hey, Tom, just to give a little bit of a background here, this is not your first rodeo, or first shot at Western States. You ran it back in 2019, which you also did really well. You podiumed, you got third place. How did you approach this year differently? And was course knowledge really crucial in your first place this year?
Yeah, I think sort of kind of in both ways. Like I think in one way it was a real positive having done it before, because I had that understanding about the race and sort of I knew what was going to be asked of me. I think the main difference between racing in Europe and the US is the culture. And it is wildly different. Like just the choice of wording that the volunteers and spectators use, for example. So in the US, it's very positive. It's, oh, you look amazing, keep going, you're so strong, have the most incredible day. Whereas in Europe, it's keep going, go faster, don't stop, keep going till you die. So I think that's definitely a big sort of culture shift. And I've now been fortunate enough to race in the US a couple of times now. At Lake Sonoma, then at States, and also at Black Canyon. So yes, that was really nice. So yeah, having sort of the exposure of the course was great, but then looking at it sort of the other way, because I went in 2019 and had a great debut, not just a great debut Western States, but a debut 100-miler. And because things went well, right, I really didn't want to think, oh, well, because things went well in 2019 and I think I'm a much better athlete now, things are just going to take care of themselves and I'm going to have a great day. So yeah, it sort of kind of worked both ways, and it definitely motivated me to delve even deeper into the training that I knew I should be doing and what that training would hopefully then lead to. And I made lots of training mistakes in 2019. I was still following far more of a sort of a road marathon with some longer trail runs thrown in training program. And I was just forever niggly and had small injuries that were just super frustrating. Whereas this year, I sort of really, by far the most specifically I've ever trained. And I've said a couple of times now that had Western States been cancelled or I had done a different race, like had I raced Broken Arrow the weekend before, I would have been fit, but I would have been nowhere near as strong as my performance was. I had just trained so specifically for Western States. And I think for me, I think that's what set my training apart. I think everyone goes into the race hoping that they've trained well. And I think I by far had the most consistent training block. And that's how I'm sort of measuring how good the training block was. It's the consistency. But I would be amazed if anyone trained as specifically as I did, sort of in relation to training on sort of similar grades and ratios of climbing and descent as in the course, heat training as well. This has definitely been it. I know it wasn't a hot year, but it's 85 degrees. It's still hot. And actually, there's a lot of science now for heat training having other performance benefits, not just getting you ready for the heat. Right. So I think a lot of people, when they found out that it was going to be a cooler year, backed off on the heat training. But as soon as I found that out, sort of 10 days before, I dropped from Flagstaff to Phoenix and I ran every day at 2 p.m. in 105, 110 degrees just to get ready to be the most ready on the start line. So then, when I was on the start line, I had probably the most confidence I've ever had going into a race, knowing and sort of my mentality going in was, there are some other really good guys racing, but I think it's my race and I want to just try and dictate it as much as possible.
Well, it's, listening to you say all of that, I had about 10 questions just go through my head. It's like, oh, I want to talk about that. So I'm going to back up to the original one. And if you think back, this was probably right in the beginning where you talked about American aid stations and British aid stations or European. And you kind of figured out, can you trust American aid station workers? I mean, you look great. You're fantastic. Yeah. Have you noticed that they said that to everybody? It doesn't matter what you look like. You were strong and wonderful.
I thought they were just saying it to me. It was
oh no.
I took it as a huge compliment.
Oh, we say it to the finishers too, right at the end of the pack. Everybody's good.
The ones that are coming in on their hands and knees, we say, "Oh, you look great."
I don't believe no. They told me I was the only person they said that to.
Hey, and then the other question that came to mind is that during the race, and it doesn't have to be Western States, just any race, you knew parts where you needed to turn it on and other parts you needed to back off and just kind of relax and cruise through. That's a great concept. It isn't a push all the way through. It's, I'm going to apply myself here. I'm going to recover here. You broke the race apart like that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's super important, especially in ultra distance racing, that you can't be the best at everything. Like if you look on paper, you take a group of 15 runners, pro male runners, the best climber isn't necessarily going to be the best descender or the best at running on flat, non-technical trail or on technical trail, unless Killian's in the conversation and he's probably the best at everything, which is super frustrating for everyone else. He's just so good. But so I think there are definitely times in races where you can sort of, sit back and relax and see what's going on. And I think that takes a little bit of pressure off yourself. So for example, like using Western States as an example, in the high country, when they had all the snow, like there was the lead group of men was, I think it sort of fluctuated from like 8 to 12, but I would always be one of the last people in the group because I didn't want to be at the front. I didn't want to use that extra energy to navigate across the course and sort of keep my head up. I just wanted to be able to sort of follow feet. And actually, there were a couple of times where people went slightly off course, but I was the person in 5th or 6th realised, so I was then just able to close gaps pretty nicely and sort of just sort of almost just sit back a little bit and just try and control the race as best as I could. And then I think that then you then just move through the race without having to think, and you can not necessarily switch off, but you can worry about other things like making sure that you're taking in nutrition and you're keeping yourself cool and just going by how you're feeling rather than having to make those sort of decisive decisions at the front of the race. And I think that then it gives you that sort of extra mental energy that when you then need to make those decisions and you want to break away, like I did at Western States, then you've got that mental capacity to, be able to make these snapshot decisions that are going to affect the rest of the race. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And I think, this year at Western States, I sort of, I feel like I managed things pretty well. And then, when it came to the point where I needed to start thinking, then I had that mental clarity and I was able to think. And thankfully this time it was the right decision, but it takes, 4 or 5 wrong decisions before you get a right one.
That's awesome. Well, we love the discussion about your victory, but we also want to hear a little bit more about your story. That's one thing that we all have in common is how we got into running. And I think I read somewhere, Tom, you have a great story of how you got into running. You were a former British Army officer, similar to Don. Don is a former Marine here in the U.S., but I think I heard that you got into trail running on a bet in a bar. That's pretty unique. Can you elaborate on that story?
Yeah, no,
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's true. I think sort of taking a step back from that, like when I was at school, I was really sporty. I do all the sports, sort of from soccer to rugby to cricket, as well as track and field and cross country running. And looking back on it now, I was always good at the running side of things. And looking back at the team sports, I looked much better than I actually was. Because in a soccer game, I would score the winning goal in the last 5 minutes, or on the rugby pitch, I would make a try-saving tackle with 2 minutes to go. And it wasn't because I was skillful or I was in the right place at the right time. I just had a bigger engine than everyone else. And when everyone else was tired, I was like, well, why are you guys tired? Like, you should be fine. So looking back on it, like, I guess it kind of makes a little bit more sense. I then left school after my A-levels, and then I then went to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, which is the British equivalent of West Point, and actually spent a couple of months at West Point, which was really cool. And I then joined a Welsh regiment, the Welsh Guards, and the Welsh are passionate about a few things. Singing is one of them, and drinking. And rugby as well. So I ended up playing lots of rugby for the Welsh Guards and for the Army. And I then, I just got to a stage in my career where I couldn't arrive. I didn't want to get injured. And then I couldn't arrive at work on a Monday morning with a black eye, or sort of a bloody nose. So it was a fairly easy decision to sort of retire from, or basically just stop playing rugby. And I'd always run to stay fit, and I was always sort of fast, and I enjoyed it. So I'd sort of just running just to stay fit. And in 2016, I had a couple of friends in the Army who did a race called Marathon des Sables. That is a 156-mile, 6-day multi-stage race across part of the Sahara Desert in Morocco. And I was tracking them, and they did really well, and so they both finished in the top 300 of the race. And when they got back, so we went out for sort of a celebration to a pub, and after a couple of beers, sort of in true sort of alpha male style, oh yeah, you guys were really good. We're here to celebrate you, but I think I can do better, and I can finish higher up, or lower down, whichever way you want to look at it. Better than you guys. And they said, not a chance. No way. Like, you're fit, you're good at sports, but this is different. It's completely different. And so yeah, sort of slightly hungover the next morning. I sort of got slightly forced into signing up for Marathon des Sables. And yeah, fast forward 12 months, I was stood on the start line at Marathon des Sables, and yeah, there we go. That's that was my into to trail running, and yeah, it's been a pretty wild journey since then.
And as I recall, you did improve on their finish times.
I did, yeah. I think so, probably by about 24 hours, which they would then say it makes the race much easier, spending far less time out of it, which I would agree with. So yes, I did better, but it was also easier than when I did it.
That's typically what some guys would do and say, right?
That's what us slow guys say. Yeah, you did it really fast, but you aren't as tough as we are because it takes us twice as long.
Exactly. Well, I'm not sure I'd be doing it if it was taking. I'm not sure I could do a Western States overnight. I'm far too scared of snakes and things like that.
Oh, let us tell you about the real Western States sometime, Tom. We like to break into what the other half of the day looks like.
It's the night running is not. It only happens when it has to happen. I'm not even sure I was in the US for just over 6 weeks, and I'm not even sure that I brought a head torch from the UK, which is probably a little bit presumptuous, but yeah, thankfully it all panned out on the day. My crew did have a backup torch just in case.
And hopefully they didn't mention that to you to show extreme confidence in the day. You wouldn't want to show up and say, "Hey, we have a torch here for you if you need it."
In the crew meeting the day before the race, it was mentioned that we're not planning on using it, but just in case, we will have one. I think they brought it to Forest Hill. So yeah, that would have been thankfully I didn't need it then or anywhere else.
Hey, part of your story, as Scott's talking story, involves laying horizontal in a hospital bed with a knee problem. Can you walk us through that, how it happened, and what the path forward looked like? Because it was a short path up a steep hill to climb up to accomplish the things you've done. So let's talk about that moment and how you handled it.
Yeah, so I've always had sort of slightly dodgy knees. And when I was 16, I had minor knee surgery to repair some cartilage that I tore playing rugby. And yeah, basically then when I run, if I run fast, I struggle to get into triple extension. So full extension in my hip, my knee, and my ankle. And then because of that, my knee ends up taking a lot of force. So in the COVID pandemic, when trail races weren't happening, but there were still some road races happening because it was just easier they didn't need as many volunteers or as much support, and everything just became looped. I started training on the road a little bit more and doing much more fast running, where you have to go into triple extension a lot of the time. Anything sort of under 5 minute miling, I'm going into triple extension, and my body really doesn't like it. Sort of things were sort of not running. Yeah, things were going pretty well, and then we ended up I did a really big track session on a small loop, on like just over a mile loop, and it's a pretty big camber on the road. With my outside leg being the one that was higher up, so taking even more force, and that was the outside leg. So yeah, basically putting loads of force and loads of pressure into my knee. I think it was just the final straw in it. So yeah, I had a cartilage tear. I had slightly strained my LCL. I had sort of severe IT band friction syndrome, and I didn't know at the time, but I had a stress fracture on the bottom of my femur. But I was now just a couple of weeks out from the British Olympic trials, sort of held in a similar for the marathon, held in a similar format to the US Olympic trials. So I sort of did the standard I say the standard thing. I said, right, let's have it injected, and then at least it won't hurt. And kind of rushed into it without having sort of doing all the proper work, but we didn't really have time. So I had it injected and had pretty much 2 weeks or a week of bed rest, and then into my taper. So, and then ended up having a bad day at the marathon trials. But I think in hindsight, quite glad that I had a bad day, because if you'd gone and had the perfect day and then realised that you had a stress fracture in your femur and torn cartilage and everything on you was wrong, like there's no way you could have raced
right
3 months down the line in Tokyo. And so I then did sort of 6 months of no running and just tons and tons of rehab, just trying to get stronger and stronger. And the IT band was so tight and so damaged that it just wasn't repairing. It just kept swelling up and then making everything else in the knee worse and more swollen, and then putting even more stress on the femur and the stress fracture. So it was a choice of, we have surgery now, or you wait 3 weeks and that stress fracture is probably going to turn into an actual fracture, and you're probably going to need to have your bone pinned, and then it's very unlikely that you'll get back to running. But even just with this, it's only a 85% chance that it will work perfectly and will get you back to where you are now, or where you were before, which is pretty scary. 85% seems good, but there's still 15 in 100 that aren't going to work, which is it's not great numbers. But I fully trusted the surgeon, and that was all organised by Red Bull, which is just, I think that's the side of things that people don't see as a Red Bull athlete. Like, you get incredibly well looked after when things are going well, but when you need your supporters and your partners the most is when they really step up to the mark. So that was incredible. So I had surgery 6 days before UTMB in 2021, and the surgery was as a success. End of August or middle of August, and from there it definitely wasn't linear progression. I sort of had to take a couple of steps. I'd take a sort of a step or two forward and then 4 or 5 steps back, and things just took time. But I knew I needed to be patient, and I'd set my goal that I wanted to be on the start line at UTMB in 2022. And I worked really hard, sort of focusing on the little things, and changed around how I did a lot of my training, a lot of recovery, and I pulled out quite a lot of stuff that I thought was super helpful, but actually it was turned into more of a hindrance than a benefit. And I was pre-injury, I was focused on the sort of the 1%ers, the 2%ers, like the marginal gains, but actually neglecting quite a lot of other factors in my life. And I get a question now, like, what's your favorite tool for recovery? And for me, it's like, well, sleep, going to bed early and waking up later. Like, you can spend thousands of dollars on recovery boots, massage guns, whatever you want, the latest in tech. If it works, it might give you 0.5%. But if you sleep properly and you invest in your sleep, and that is, for me, the 100% the biggest game changer. And that's something that me and my wife, who's a professional Olympic distance triathlete, it's something that we really focus on. And it's super boring. Like, 7 days a week, like, we're in bed by like by 9:30, 9:45. But it's something that you have to do in order to be able to do your training and to better recover from the previous day's training and prepare for the next day's training. So just, I guess, sort of from there, I sort of just slowly started building up. And again, with Red Bull, they've got a athlete performance center. There's one in LA and there's one in Austria, just outside Salzburg. And it used to be a rehab center, but it's now a performance center. But I did my sort of return to running phase there, and I spent a month sort of November, December 2021 out there, which was incredible. Every session was monitored by at least one physio or PT. And yeah, what that allowed me to do was sort of just fast forward my recovery. And I got back running on an Ultra-G, and then running on the treadmill, and then running outside, and did my first run outside there. And it was, just over 3 months post-surgery. And I was told by the surgeon it'd probably be more like 6 months. And then, the possibilities sort of then opened up to start racing, and raced a couple of sort of earlier races in the season just to test the knee and to see how things were before UTMB. My training wasn't particularly special. It was just getting more and more consistent. And I'd started working with my coach, Scott Johnson, in the US, actually the week before I had my knee surgery. And whereas before I was kind of looking at like, what's the maximum amount of training my body can tolerate, we flipped it around to be like, right, what is the minimum amount of training you need to do in order to give yourself a shot of winning these races? And in 2021, it was probably my lowest year of training. But I wasn't injured. I was super consistent. I think I missed like 3 or 4 days of training in the year that were planned. And it was just a really progressive build that then, once I had UTMB under my belt and sort of going into this, I then got married at the end of last year, and we went away for a couple of weeks on honeymoon afterwards. The build to Western States started in the 1st of January. And because I'd laid this great foundation last year and into the previous years, I was really able to sort of step on with training this year. In between the 1st of January and before my taper started, like I averaged 126 miles a week for 6 months, which for me is high. Some weeks were lower, some weeks were higher. The biggest week was like 148 miles. And that was all at altitude in Flagstaff, Arizona. I've definitely not forgotten that, nearly 2 years ago, I wasn't running at all. And what I've done since then has been, I didn't think that I was going to get back to that. So just approaching sort of each day at a time, each race at a time, and worrying about the big stuff before trying to get those marginal gains. It might not be as sexy, but it works, and it works better than trying to cheat the system.
One of the other things that we all have in common, whether we have a cougar that's being shipped to our house or whether we're going out for a 6-mile trail run, is there are setbacks. And you mentioned that you had a team, whether that's the Red Bull team or your support with family. I think I read somewhere that you definitely need that. Now we slower people, we may not have a Red Bull sponsor that has this training facility, but we do have people around us. How hard was it for you to accept help? This is a solo type sport a lot of times, and we're out there working. It's our watch, it's our finish, it's our start, but we surround ourselves with people that help us get through. How important was that, getting through this setback that you had?
Yeah, it was super important. I think the most important thing, and actually, I didn't find it at all difficult to ask for help. I was at rock bottom, sort of with an injury, and it probably sounds there are way more people dealing with way worse things than I was. But as a pro athlete, when you're told that this could be a career-changing, career-ending injury, it seems like a pretty big thing. Like, yes, it's not life and death, but it's pretty scary. I really didn't find it difficult to ask for help at all. And in my opinion, I don't see trail running as an individual sport at all. I couldn't be on the start line racing if it wasn't for friends, family, my wife Sophie, coaches, physios, physiologists, manager. For me, that's the sport. And by creating this team, this network around you, you're able to do things like, it's not just me who has to put in the big sacrifices. It's those around me who are sacrificing things for me to be really selfish, and to go off for weeks on end on training camps and racing and being really tired after training, that I'm sort of just, going to sleep and I'm not speaking to my friends or my family. And it makes it really difficult. So I think being able to ask for help is one thing. But just because, you need to find the people who are right for you. So whether it's the best psychologist in the world, they might not be the best psychologist in the world for you. So I think it's surrounding yourself with people who care about you and want the very best for you. And they might not have the accolades, but actually, if it works for you, then it works. Don't go sort of chasing after other people's perfect. Go chasing after your own.
Great point. We learned earlier in our conversation that you were a military officer, and no doubt, being a military officer, you have top secret clearance. And I know this next topic includes a little bit of top secrecy. So we know you might not be able to divulge all information, but you've been part of development of a shoe over at Adidas, and as you say, adidas. And so tomato, that's how we recognize it. What can you tell us about being part of a development of a shoe and some of the characteristics of that? Hey, Tom, we have an editor, so no problem. They'll bounce that right out.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a super fun process. It's been a really long process, and I think in the last couple of years we've really seen sort of trainer designers sort of really go a long way, sort of pushing the boundaries on what's possible and how much advantage you can get. It's been really fun working hand in hand with the team at Adidas TERREX. Firstly, the innovation side of things. Trialing different foams, different stiffness, different densities of the midsole, different outsoles and how much traction that I need on the trails, different lacing systems, different uppers with the breathability. And there's so much going into it that leads to the performance. So it's been really fun working really closely with them. And what we've done is we've created this shoe that isn't only a great shoe for myself and for sort of other athletes who are really trying to push the limit of what's possible, but also I think it's allowing, what it's gonna do is it's gonna allow other athletes at the mid pack and the backpack to be able to achieve their very best results as well. And that was always sort of firmly in my plan with creating the shoe, is I don't want it to just be, this is an elite shoe for elite runners. Like, no, this is an elite shoe, but it's your version of elite. Like, it's going to help you.
Nice.
It's going to be able to bring out the best in everybody. It'll take a little bit of getting used to, as when these sort of super carbon rocket shoes on the road came out. Is it the easiest shoe to put on and run really fast? No, but actually after a couple of miles, it's incredible. So I describe it like I'm a big Harry Potter fan. I describe it, and for any of the listeners who listened to Harry or watched Harry Potter, when Harry first picks his wand at Ollivander's wand shops, he holds it and sort of papers are flying everywhere and it sort of lights up, and the wand chooses the wizard. And I think it's the same for me. It's the same sensation when I put this on. So if you put the shoe on and you feel fast. I love trail running, but when I put this shoe on, I love it even more because it's just,
wow.
It's incredible. And I am, truly excited for it to come to market very, very soon. It's, in my opinion, it's a complete game changer, and I'm incredibly proud to be able to put my name next to it.
Have you been able to share this with some other people that maybe not as fast as you and have them try it on? Does it help them love the sport better than just similar to you? Does the shoe choose the other slower runners as well? I'm just curious for a friend.
Yeah, I see for yourself.
Okay.
But yes, I think is it gonna make a backpacker or a mid packer be able to break course records in the most competitive races? No. It's not got wheels in it. It's not got rocket packs on the back. But it makes you feel like it does. And if that means running 5 minute miles or it's running 8 minute miles, it's all relative. But yeah, all I can say is for me, it makes my experience on the trails even better.
I love how he goes 5 to 8 minutes and figures, well, I think they stop the clock after 8 minutes.
Oh, 18,
There's some of us that are.
18 minutes.
There you go.
I
Hey,
work in kilometers anyway, so yeah, 8 minutes.
Oh,
Forget all the excuses.
fair enough. Fair enough.
if you haven't seen this shoe, I'm going to put a link, Freeman, in the show notes
Thank you.
for a short video documentary about Tom's win at Western States. It's called Buckle Up, Tom Evans' Trail Running Journey to Western States 100. And in that video, you will see a few clips. I'm sure our marketing person, Alice, who's on the line with us, did that on purpose. But there are some short clips of that shoe. So if you're interested to see what this Adidas TERREX prototype shoe looks like, yet to be named, I'm gonna also suggest to the marketing team at Adidas TERREX that we call it the Tom Evans wand shoe, or the wand. I don't know.
Well, I tell you, I had to hit pause because they're moving so fast you can't get a real good look at them. So I hit pause and was able to see it. Yeah.
We're looking forward to that. Hey, Tom, before we let you go here, the key question is, as a top 10 finisher at Western States, you get an invitation back to Western States the following year. What are your intentions?
Great question. I think it would be very, very difficult to turn down the M1 bib. I haven't planned my race calendar for next year yet. And a lot of it will be slightly dependent. If my wife Sophie qualifies for the Olympics, so I will have to see. I think I know I would love to go back. So yes, I think it would be a very difficult no. And then I'm a little bit of a yes man. So you have to ask after Craig has asked me if I'm returning whenever that is, end of the year. Yeah, I will be able to say for sure, but I'd find it. I would get a serious fear of missing out if I wasn't in Olympic Valley in 50 weeks' time.
Well, regardless, whether you're at the Olympics or Olympic Valley, your career is long and promising, and we're going to see a lot more of you, and there's more M1s waiting for you, and we're looking forward to watching you be so successful in your career.
Thanks very much, Dom.
Hey, Tom, thanks for coming on. It was a pleasure to get to know you through this preparation phase and our discussion today. We hope to see your name a lot more throughout the year. So thank you for joining us. More importantly, go grab yourself some Adidas TERREX prototype shoes and run
Mas.